Well, hey, thank you guys for joining us today. Today, I have a real gift for anybody that's going to watch this. We're thinking about people that own their own business and how they're building those businesses, and man, who we could bring to pour into your life to bring some value to you as you think about those businesses. Top of my list was this guy right here, Neel Doshi. People ask me all the time, man, who are you listening to? Who's a voice that influences you? What books are you reading? And over and over and over again, I come back to you, Neel, and I come back to Primed to Perform. A lot of folks have not read this. This is a New York Times bestseller, but it is also your first book. So you're not, guys, written 100 of these yet. You and Lindsay, your beautiful wife, worked on this together, put out your first book. It's a New York Times bestseller, and it has absolutely transformed the way I think about culture, about performance, about team building. And I was so excited, man, for you to join us to just bring some value to some folks out there who are thinking about these things. Man, a lot of guys run teams, run their own businesses, and are thinking about, man, everyone wants to do this well, right?
Sure,
all of us want to invest our life well. All of us want to be high performers. I don't think anyone wakes up and says, I'd love to be a C+. I ended up there a couple of times in my academic career, but I wasn't where I wanted to be. It wasn't where my mom and dad wanted me to be, for sure. So, man, I would love it. I always like to hear backstories, man. I always like to hear people's purpose and passion and their why. So maybe if you could just kind of open us up and share why in the world and how is it that you got into the business really of coaching people in their teams around performance, and why performance matters in the workplace, and how a high TOMO, as you call it, a total motivation, a high TOMO culture. Why is that important in the workplace today?
Well, I'll tell you how I got into this world. My first job was 21, 22 years ago now. I was a software engineer at a big bank. I went into this bank with all the right motives. I thought it's 1997.
Yep.
This institution was going to invest a ton of money into the internet. The thought of bringing what I could do as an engineer to that problem, I thought I actually helped lift people out of poverty, make a big difference in the world. That's why I went into it. So I went into it bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, wanting to make a difference. About 4 months into it, I realized that I just hated working. Like, hated it. And the funny thing is, I couldn't tell you why. This organization tried to keep its engineers happy. We had the ping pong tables. Yep. We had the open office layout.
Beanie bags.
We had the bean bags. I mean, bean bags in a bank in the late 90s, that's innovative right there.
Forward thinking.
That's forward thinking. And not only did I not like it, but pretty much the engineers as a whole didn't like it. And I thought, well, maybe it's me. Like, maybe I'm not cut out for work. Maybe I'm not cut out to be impactful in the workplace. And I kind of went through that mindset for a while. By the end, so I was there for about 2.5 years. By the end, I was working, I'd show up at noon, I'd leave at 5. I mean, I'm phoning it in,
Noon to 5.
Yeah.
That's pretty short.
Now, I left to start a company. I was starting the company kind of in the side, and eventually I decided to just jump right into starting it. So one day I'm working noon to 5.
Yeah.
The next day, I'm working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And
Sounds
I'm
familiar.
loving it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what every entrepreneur
Just springing out of bed in the morning. Yeah, you're living the dream.
Exactly. So here I am saying to myself, okay, it's not me. Because I just I didn't change.
Right.
From one day to the next, literally day before to the day after, phoning it into 14 hours, 7 days a week and loving it, it could not have been me. So it was something else. But I couldn't even tell you what that something else was. Because when I tried to build it into this organization, I really couldn't. I produced people that were like the old me.
Wow.
So I couldn't tell you what it was. Like, what was at the core of what makes an organization ultra high performing.
Yeah.
And so
what personally was like motivating you? What was giving you that juice of energy in the day to get up work 14 hours and say, I'm loving it, instead of working 5 and saying I'm miserable?
Well, now I know.
Yeah.
So after 20 years of study, I now can tell you. It took a long time to answer that question. But one was play. I felt like the work was fun. I'm solving problems. I'm having ideas. I can try something new, try an experiment. Only in retrospect do I realize how much I was learning through experimentation on the job. Like, constantly tinkering, constantly exploring something different. Every day was novelty. I mean, that's play, fun. Purpose. Like, I felt like my work, my contribution really mattered. That if I didn't show up to work that day, we wouldn't make progress like we need to.
Yeah.
So
you weren't just cogging the wheel, man. You were
Exactly.
an essential element to the success of the endeavor.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Now, the funny thing is, organizations intentionally turn people to cogs in the machine.
Yep.
For very real reasons. So you'll ask an executive, well, why did you design your organization so that everyone is a cog in the machine? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Well, the answer you get is, I wanted to create economies of scale, and I wanted to create operational resilience, fungibility.
Yeah, and I remember, I don't know if you ever read the book E-Myth. Michael Gerber wrote.
No.
So it's a huge book among entrepreneurs, E-Myth, and there are a lot of really great, powerful concepts. But I think that's one actually that is really lifted up in that book. In that, like, hey, you need to come. Everything needs to be a process, right? And in fact, the less people you need, and the lower the skill of the people that you need, hey, that's even more powerful to your business, right? So it was beginning to kind of like promote this idea that the less human you could or the less gifted you needed, folks to be, the better your business is going to be, because it is scalable, and man, people are interchangeable, and you kind of we're stripping away some of that intrinsic value of like what makes people, right? Of creativity and some of the processes that I know that I think made you come alive in your own environment when you're being challenged and stretched. And I don't think that's where Gerber was going with the whole premise. But I do know I've seen a lot of folks, and I myself have thought about that, going, how do we just make this wheel that kind of works with interchangeable people, and that really doesn't pull out and help people use the unique values and the unique ways that kind of God knit them together, and the gifts and strengths that they have to be a benefit to the organization. I kind of think we've taken kind of a minimum approach, to people's capacities and skill sets and try to plug them into a superior process.
Yeah, there's a baby there and a bathwater. It's important to be able to separate the two.
Separate them for us, Neel.
Separate them. Let me try my best to separate them.
This is his unique gift. Here we go. Here's one on a tee for you, Neel.
The process isn't a bad thing. Like, having a repeatable process is actually a good thing. So, put differently, one of the things we talk about in Prime to Perform is there's two types of performance. One we call tactical, the other called adaptive.
Yeah.
Tactical is about convergence, getting people to do the same thing, getting a lot of people to do the same thing. Follow plan, follow process, follow procedure. Fundamentally the force of convergence. But there's a second, it's adaptive. If tactical is convergence, adaptive is divergence. It's getting people to do different things. It's getting them to not follow the plan and solve the problem.
Yep.
You need both in an organization. Yep. You don't want one without the other. Now, sometimes the way we talk about tactical and adaptive is tactical is really how well have we learned from our past. So when you think about a process, a strategy, a procedure, a policy, all of that is meant to be an encapsulation of past learning. Yeah. We're trying to take a lot of complex learnings, simplify it into a process. Yep. Adaptive is how well we learn for the future. We need both. We need to demonstrate we can learn from our past, but we also need to learn for the future, because the world is constantly changing, and there's lots of VUCA. VUCA.
You just use a term I don't think many people that haven't read Prime to Perform know.
So VUCA is essentially the force of chaos.
Yeah.
It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Yeah. That the environment we're in is in a constant state of change. Every single moment of every single day, like if you look at your organization, no moment here is perfectly predictable.
Right.
Everything is unique at the end of the day. So the processes, the strategy, the encapsulations of our past learning, all of that is a simplification. Because we know this process we've created is the right average process. For the average case, this is the right thing to do. Not every case is the average case.
Right.
So what do we want to do? Do we want to shoehorn non-average cases into the average process, or do we want to deal with them uniquely?
So I think this is, you're getting into like VUCA and how adaptive and tactical performance attack this issue. What I think is important for anybody that's listening to this to recognize and understand, we hear a lot about how technology is a disruptor. Right? Yeah. Technology is a disruptor. And we think about challenger brands and disruptive brands and things. And I know you've studied, what I love about you is you've studied business and culture throughout history, and you have so many great historical examples of what this looks like. I know, you and I have talked, and that I feel like we are living in a time right now, a day and time right now, where business and life is being transformed so rapidly by technology. Yeah. By technology. That we are experiencing more VUCA, because of that, particularly in business, than we ever have in history.
No doubt.
And folks ask me all the time that, hey, is my job going to be done by a robot? Is my job going to be done by a machine? And the answer that I'm giving them, really based on your teachings and the time we spent together, I said, hey, if you're working in a tactical job where man, it's repeatable, a process can replace you, yes, expect that at some point here in time, a machine will be doing your job, and you need to be aware of that. That's just the reality of the context we're living in. And what that means is you need to be, as a human, moving into more adaptive type roles where you're using creativity, where you're using problem solving, where you're using your unique humanness to innovate and to do things machines don't do extremely well. So maybe unpack a little bit of that, because I think that's such a powerful concept in this book to help people think about, what does their next 10 or 20 years of work look like, and where should they be thinking about developing themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an example. So take the company Tesla. Tesla's a company that's building a movement. And their customers want them to succeed. I want them to succeed. Like, we look at what Tesla's trying to do. They are the vanguard of saying we don't need the fossil fuel automotive industry the way it's been. Like, we can do something different, and it works.
Yep.
And they took a lot of risk, a lot of innovation to try to get there. Tesla has made a decision that might end up being fatal. So a few years ago, Tesla realized that it needed to build an affordable car, the Model 3. They knew that they had to get production targets up to a pretty high level. Like, I think something like 7,500 or so per week by this year, to actually sustain their economics.
Yeah.
So they said that a few years ago. In the intervening time, they bought two companies that were experts in factory automation. So building robots, building machines, they wanted to essentially build a humanless factory.
Yep.
So bought two companies, put all this in place, started to build factories that were essentially purely humanless. And they're finding that their production targets were nowhere close to being met. If they're trying to hit 7,000, they were at like 1,000. On paper, this factory should have been easily hitting those numbers, but they weren't. Thing is, we know why. You had to balance tactical and adaptive performance. All these machines could do was the tactical. So if every single thing was going exactly as planned, these machines were great.
Yeah.
But rarely, even in an automobile factory where you think it's a super controlled environment, rarely is every single thing going exactly like planned.
Yeah.
A bolt might be misshapen.
Right.
Threads might not be quite aligned right. Like, a part might not be exactly fitting properly. It's very difficult to create a machine that can account for every possible thing that could go wrong in a factory. That's what the people are for. They didn't realize that. And so as a result, they had fairly large production problems. Only in the last few months, like since March, April, did they realize it was a mistake. They've actually been public about it. They've said excessive automation was a mistake.
Yeah.
We needed the people to drive.
Which is super cool, right? To actually own when you make mistakes are okay,
exactly
right? Learning's good. We need to be trying things. We need to be innovative.
I respect them for owning it.
Absolutely. Then step up and say, hey, made a mistake, guys.
Yeah.
Human being.
Musk tweeted, hey, excessive automation at Tesla was a mistake. To be certain, my mistake.
Wow.
Then he writes, humans are underrated. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
He puts that out himself. Now, that's great.
It is.
And now they're trying to pivot around that. I only wish they knew this lesson when they started.
Right.
Because it was going to play out this way. Yeah. If you have an environment that has VUCA, if you only solve the tactical, you're not going to like the performance outcomes you get. So this is where they landed. Now, the problem that you're describing of automation, a lot of organizations have forgotten this basic lesson. You need the tactical and the adaptive. So they're rushing to automate everything, but they're not seeing the productivity gains. They're seeing more expense and performance that hasn't really moved, and quality suffer.
Yeah.
Because you need both.
Yeah.
Now, your advice to your colleague, I think, is really good, because we're going through an economic phase change as a society right now, which is really a tough place to be. So think about our economy. It's gone through phase changes in the past, like agriculture to manufacturing, manufacturing to services, services to this post-services, automation, adaptive world that we're about to move into. Whenever our economy goes through a phase change, think about it through the lens of total motivation. We haven't really talked about this, but in our research, we talk about a human's motive is what drives their adaptability. If your motive is emotional pressure, economic pressure, inertia, you won't be adaptive in your work. You'll, in fact, regress backward. You'll stick to what you know rather than learning the new thing. If your motive is play, purpose, potential, you'll be adaptive in your work. That core realization is societal too. So imagine you're going from agricultural to manufacturing, and you have a large portion of the population that in their gut feels like what they know how to do is no longer going to be valued the way it was. What that's going to do is increase their emotional and economic pressure.
Yeah.
It's going to create fear, anxiety. That rarely does that fear, anxiety actually make you say, okay, well, let's lean forward.
Right.
Let's learn new things.
More creative. Let's think of it.
It doesn't do that.
So it's compression.
It does the opposite. It says, I want to look backward. I want to prevent the change. Change is a force of nature. It's the tide. That's the fundamental issue. Whenever you see these economic phase changes, because of that rising emotional and economic pressure, that low TOMO, as we describe it, low total motivation, it creates a resistance to change even when you most need it. It causes societal unrest. Agriculture to manufacturing, civil war. Think about manufacturing the services. This is all the unrest of the 50s and 60s. Now we're going from services to post-services. We're seeing a whole new wave of societal unrest.
Wow. Yeah.
For this very reason. If we could help, our mission, what we're trying to work on, is we realize we're going through this phase change right now. If we can help every organization realize it is in their best interest as an organization to make sure their people have learned how to be adaptive. Well, one, you've solved a lot of problems. You've helped this organization become high performing. You've helped these people realize they don't have to be afraid of the change. That they know how to learn. They know how to be adaptive. They have the skills that will take them forward. That's what we're trying to get done.
That's your opening goal. Yeah. So I love spending time with people that pull me further, that stretch me, that have visions larger than mine. They kind of sweep you up in them sometimes. Neel is one of those guys. I used to thought, hey, we want to be a movement of change in our industry and corporate cultures and communities across America. Want to do a lot of neat things, transform communities, help financial services, love marginalized people in cities. Like, we want to do a lot of stuff. Neel has a bigger vision, okay? This is a larger vision. Neel, would you be so bold as to share with the entire social media world your vision for what you want to accomplish with Vega Factor? The name of the company is Vega Factor. The name of the book is Primed to Perform. Company's Vega Factor. What is the vision of Vega Factor?
Well, we realize this very problem is endemic. Our goal is for every organization in the world to be high TOMO, play, purpose, potential as their driving force by 2050.
So you would like to create your own movement of change in workforces in every organization across the world, that they'd be a higher TOMO organization by 2050.
Yeah. I mean, as we see it, it has to happen. Otherwise, society is going to have a fairly massive problem in how we think about the workforce.
Why is that important to you, though, man? I mean, you're such a thoughtful guy. You and I have had these conversations. You were one of my favorite guys to talk about life and just vision and passion with. Why does it matter? Why does it matter that everyone have a higher total motivation in the workplace?
It matters for so many reasons. One is the productivity, the growth of enterprise is what creates a higher and higher standard of living. So as organizations become more productive, as they learn how to do more with less, that spills over to the world. Things become cheaper. Everything becomes cheaper. People can actually have a higher standard of living. It advances humanity forward. And when we look at productivity growth in the US has stalled. Now just think about that. We're in the middle of the computer age, and productivity growth has stalled. There's a lot of debate on why has productivity growth stalled. Well, maybe some people say it's just not measured properly. Some people say we've realized all the gains from technology and all those are gone now. We believe something different. We believe over the last 20, 30 years, companies have systemically transformed themselves to be lower and lower in total motivation. They're driving themselves more and more with emotional pressure, economic pressure, and inertia. So these companies don't know how to change anymore. So new technology exists. These companies don't know how to quickly embrace it, absorb it. People aren't learning at a fast pace because of it. Their pace of learning has slowed down. And so their ability to actually improve themselves has now stalled completely. So that's one reason. If that engine keeps at this pace of being stalled, well, it's really hard to grow an economy, to make it more productive, to help support more and more people.
And the people that are most dramatically impacted in that kind of scenario are the marginalized.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are those kind of that are the most marginalized in any culture or any context. As things get more expensive. And so by making a culture or society more productive, you're actually ensuring better access to food, affordable health care, affordable housing, all these things that marginalized folks in every community, every society in the world struggle with.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So that's reason one. Reason two is similar. Because we've seen this steady decrease in total motivation across whole societies, you see some crazy things happening now, like adult stress levels, anxiety levels are crazy high to the point where suicide rates increase.
Wow.
Now, that's a
wild thing, because when I look back historically, like you're a history guy, I dabble, but I mean, you look at the standard of living in like what life looked like 100 years ago, 200, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Incredibly difficult.
It's objectively better now.
Yeah.
Yet anxiety is higher.
Yeah.
Now that's because of these concepts, the concepts we talk about in Prime to Perform, that if most of people's adult lives are spent at work.
Yeah.
And if that workplace is high in emotional pressure, high in economic pressure, high in inertia, it takes its toll on you.
Which sounds a lot like the NFL, by the way. For any of you guys watching, a lot of economic pressure. You see every time somebody's released, that's NFL for fired. They just received a whole bunch of economic pressure. Emotional pressure, I had coaches call me things that could never repeat. I don't even want to remember them. They were so bad. And yeah, I mean, inertia.
Like that touch a nerve right there. I
mean, yeah.
It really went straight for a nerve.
Anyone that played any sports will remember these points. The economic pressure and the emotional pressure of professional sports up here. And oftentimes, what I'm learning, what I love and learning is, man, you're taking away that sense of play, right? Like when a lot of guys went into pro sport, they like, it was a game. It's a game. It's supposed to be fun.
It's supposed to be fun.
And it's amazing when you watch guys that are really performing. I think man, you see them smiling.
Yeah,
right? You see them smiling. They're high five and they're chest bumping. They are having a great time.
Exactly.
And the great teams I've been on had that kind of culture. John Gruden led that kind of culture when we won the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Man, he was a fun guy. He was having fun. Influence runs downhill, right? It trickled through our whole organization. People were having a good time. They were playing. You're talking about playing loose, you know, and playing aggressively. And I know you get some great examples of pro sports, of teams that have seen this kind of play out. But that's one that's really resonated with me. I've tried to deconstruct in my mind, because my go-to, my training for 25 years was, hey, if it's not working, work a little harder, tighten down the screws, put a little bit more pressure on you, because that's always what I experienced from a coach who's trying to get a little more performance out of you. But it was actually creating the inverse.
Yeah, exactly.
So Neel, we've known each other for 4 or 5 years now, I think. And man, one of the reasons I was so passionate about bringing you in and just starting to teach some of this incredible material that you've spent years compiling to our entire organization is because some of the concepts that you and I talked about 4 or 5 years ago, I've just seen playing out at a faster and faster pace. The variability, the uncertainty, just the total VUCA in our industry, and really across almost every industry.
It's amazing.
It is crazy.
It is crazy.
Uber is a $130 billion company now, apparently. I don't think they existed when we met 5 years ago. There are companies that are absolutely exploding onto the scene. They are, Amazon has transformed itself in the last 5 to 7 years. It's unbelievable how quickly markets are moving. And I have a passion. We want to love our people well. We talk about love being acting in the long-term best interest of our people. I believe a lot of your work around understanding the difference of tactical and adaptive performance and understanding what it means and how you can have total motivation, how you can have fulfillment, happiness, purpose in your work. That's a gift I want to give to every team member at Movement Mortgage. And that's why I was so passionate to bring you, Lindsay, and the whole Vega Factor team in to impact our organization. So I'm curious to hear, after 7 months of kind of an in-depth integration into a financial services organization, man, what have you seen? What are we doing well? Where do we need to keep improving? What have you learned, kind of in this whole process?
Well, let me start with what we've learned about us.
Yeah.
Because in many ways, we view ourselves as trying to be good teachers, which isn't easy because you have to really try to understand a person's context. Teaching requires lots of adaptability. Everybody is different. Every organization is different. There's a few things that I'm realizing we have to teach better. So, for example, one of the things we have been teaching your organization is every single person here should have ideas to drive experimentation. They should be owning their own continuous improvement. What I realize is we haven't really taught the why of that super well. So, for example, there's 2 things that I'm realizing in the last couple of weeks my colleagues have been teaching here. to remedy that. One is, well, we're trying to do this thing, but we're not good at it, so maybe we should stop. What I've been trying to teach your organization is, let's say you had a child that you thought should learn something, like math or football or anything. And let's say they weren't good at it.
Definitely not football, but yes.
Yeah, so not football. But let's say you're trying to get them to learn math or violin or piano.
Yeah.
And they weren't good at it. Would you tell them, well, therefore stop practicing? I see a lot of organizations do this. They say, well, we're not good, so we stop practicing. That's actually why you practice.
Yeah.
You only get good by practicing when you're not. And so that's one thing I think we haven't really taught very well. It's you're going to go through this process.
Yeah.
Well, in that process, you're not going to be good at it.
Yeah. Which isn't comfortable. None of us like that, right? None of us like, I like to be high performing.
That's exactly right.
I do not like to not be good at something and be in process on it. I shared that with you a lot as we were going through this. I wasn't comfortable with the digital whiteboard. I'm like, man, I don't know how to use it. I want to be an expert. I don't want to look bad in front of my team as I'm supposed to be leading this whole thing. How do we do it?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, and that creates this, well, maybe we shouldn't do it because we're not good at it. It's the exact opposite. Right. That's why you practice. You practice until you're good at it. And so one of the things I'm realizing is we should be doing more to really help your colleagues say to themselves, actually, it's not the destination, it's the journey. Yeah. Practice, 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 practice. Make the practice part of the play. Yeah. That's one learning. The second learning is we haven't helped teach the causality of ownership tightly enough. So for instance, one of the things that I've heard in kind of sampling feedback around your organization is, well, I don't think my people are coming up with good ideas because they don't really feel like they're owners. And I said to them, you got it wrong. It's the exact opposite of that. What I said to one of your colleagues was, think about a time where somebody asked you for help on some random thing that you had no ownership over at all. Right. And you gave them an idea and they used that idea. Now, don't you feel some ownership over that thing? Right. Like, don't you feel invested all of a sudden? Yeah. The model isn't you feel ownership, so now you have a good idea. The model is if everybody has an idea that somehow bakes itself into the fabric of this place, that's what will create ownership, not the other way around. And that ownership will spill over into every bit of work that they do. Yeah. Yeah. So what we're realizing is we didn't really get people to realize that's what a learning journey feels like. Yeah. And so we're trying to pivot around that right now.
I just spent some time with a good friend of mine, John Maxwell, and every single time he talked, at one point he'd do this. And he'd sit here awkwardly, just like this, quietly, with his arm up in the air. At some point he would unpack what this was. And what it was, you said, man, anything worthwhile is uphill. Yeah. Anything and everything worthwhile is uphill. Yeah. And it's a journey. And a new skill is going to be an uphill journey. Yeah. It's going to be work. It's going to be effort. I think those of us that have been in anything that we've really found purpose from. Man, it was something that we poured ourselves into, and it was difficult. It is difficult. Knowing that up front sometimes is important. Because sometimes you start to hit adversity and you go, oh, I must be doing the wrong thing because it's hard. And you're like, no, you're doing exactly the right thing because it's hard.
That's exactly right.
That's why you're going the right direction sometimes.
Put another way. Every organization will eventually hit a growth plateau because every organization eventually captures its market, its industry, competitors come in. It's this inevitable force of nature. You'll eventually hit your growth plateau. Now, the problem is most organizations, as they're approaching that plateau, put into place a lot of low TOMO systems. So pressure, emotional pressure, economic pressure, ratings, rankings, pay for performance, like
done
a bunch
that.
of stuff.
Check.
Now, the problem with that is when you really analyze that stuff is heavily incentivizing forward motion only. Yeah. The problem is learning anything is usually a bit backward before it comes back up again. So this is why you have a low TOMO organization that can't adapt anymore, because it will fundamentally disincentivize the learning process. You won't want to try something different because you know that the process of learning for a while is going to slow you down.
Yes. I'll give my last sports analogy here. So now, since I'm an old man and cannot run around with the biggest, baddest dudes on the planet, I've taken up jiu-jitsu, which is like wrestling with pajamas. And it's just
taking up reading.
Reading. All right. Well, I wrestle
safer.
in our pajamas, and then we try to wrap belts around each other's neck and choke each other. It gets really interesting. If anyone's watching, Google it, and you'll understand a little bit more. But one of the things I see over and over again in that sport is that, man, your game shrinks the better your competition is. And it's usually the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because you start getting stressed and you go to those 1 or 2 moves that you know really well.
Exactly right.
And man, they can
and you become
defend those
predictable.
moves. Oh,
That's exactly
man,
right.
I mean, like I see it. I've gotten a little bit better now, so I can kind of see it. And I can see guys' games just shrink. I try to tell them, it's the worst thing you can do against me.
It's the exact same dynamic.
Please stay aggressive, play offense. Prevent defense does what?
Yeah.
Come on, Neil. You didn't play football, but prevent defense does what?
Prevent defense.
It prevents you from winning, Neil. It prevents you from winning.
There you go.
All right. Next book.
You tried to give me
next
that one.
book. All right. We're going to have that one in there. In football, prevent defense prevents you from winning because you're on your heels. And you shrink your game. And the other team can attack. It's the same thing happens in business, happens in life.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, I've watched that play out. So, Neil, thank you so much for being with us, man. You're a gift as a friend. You're a gift as a business advisor. I'd recommend you. Folks ask me all the time. I'm going to tell you again at the end of the show. If you're curious what's informing me, if you want a book that really will help shift the way you think about a high-performing culture, grab a copy of Prime to Perform. It's a New York Times bestseller. Thankfully, Neil's wife, Lindsay, wrote most of it, so you can trust it. No, it's fantastic. It'll inform you. It'll inform you as a parent. It'll inform you as you think, we have a school. It's helped our teachers think about education. It's not just for a business book. This is a book really about life and human beings and how we interact with one another.
So let me turn the question back to you.
Uh-oh.
What do you think you've learned from this process?
What do I think I've learned from this entire book? So the author asked me what I learned from his book and process. No pressure. Thank you, Neil, for that.
I'm quizzing this.
Yeah.
I'll give you a grade at the end.
Oh, look, I think for anyone in a leadership position, even if you're leading, it is important to have a team around you. And I consider you really part of my team and a person that I trust, that I care about, that I know cares about me and cares about our organization as well, and cares enough about me to tell me the hard truths sometimes. And man, you've encouraged me, I think, which is important because I need to know you're coming from a place of trust and concern. But you've also challenged and stretched me, to have hard conversations with colleagues that might be in a low tomo place, to think about the ways that I am really creating economic pressure, emotional pressure, inertia, which is so what I came out of, man. I mean, that's what I know. And I've tried to be honest and vulnerable with you to be like, hey, man, here's where I'm struggling because this is when things get tough. This is what I go to. And you've gone, oh, man, think about how we keep a sense of play, of purpose and potential in what we do, because that's when people need it most, is through adversity and tough times. We've had a tough year this year as an organization. And we've been thinking about, man, how do we make sure we can keep a sense of play and purpose and potential in what we do and not just try to solve problems by cranking down the pressure, which is really my nature. I mean, that's, or at least it's my training. I think I love the idea of being in a place of play, purpose, and potential, but everything I've learned up until this point was kind of the inverse of that. So I think one of the really powerful things this year for me has been to have an external sounding board, man, in you to give, hey, here's what's going on in our company, in our organization. And you, in a very balanced way, in a very caring way, could step back and go, hey, I hear these challenges, and let me help you think about ways to really love and value your people, because I know that's your culture, I know that's your mission statement, in the way you approach those challenges, so that they can have a sense of play, a sense of purpose, and a sense of potential in their work, which increases their total motivation, hopefully helps with just their happiness, right? Because you touched on it a little bit when we kind of talked about stress in society, but we're seeing it's rampant. I mean, like the workplace is where people do life now. I mean, it's where we have our community. I spend more time with my work colleagues than I do with my own wife and daughters. It's
true.
Which is kind of crazy.
It is.
And man, like what I experience here is what I take home with me. And so it's important and it matters for human beings. What does the culture at work feel like, man? You've, I think, really poured into me. Hopefully I've been pouring back into our folks to make sure we're doing everything we can to be filling people up with a high sense of total motivation so that, man, they can be more fulfilled in their work and just as humans in life. Man, you're a gift as a friend, Neil. You've been a gift to this organization, and I'm thrilled for everyone that watches this to get a little more of the great work you and Lindsay have put together in Prime to Perform.
Well, thank you very much, Casey. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man.